The 1980s was a decade of radical transition, marked by the aggressive rise of cheap plastics, premature electronics, and desperate corporate mergers. For Great Britain's car industry, it was a period where traditional craftsmanship was systematically traded for half-baked technology and extreme cost-cutting. Thousands of hard-working British motorists, moving away from the rust-prone disasters of the 70s, stepped into modern showrooms expecting a high-tech revolution. Instead, they walked directly into a new decade of betrayal. These cars didn't just break down. They swindled buyers with annoying gimmicks, fragile components, and engineering flaws that turned the dream of 80s modernization into absolute driveway remorse. Today on UKTorque, we are counting down 10 disastrous 1980s cars that British people bitterly regretted buying. Stay with us until our number one spot, because it belongs to an iconic, stainless steel, futuristic dream backed by millions of pounds of government money that turned out to be the ultimate financial and mechanical deception of the century. Number 10. Austin Maestro, the mechanical backchatter. We begin our countdown in 1983 with a car that was heavily marketed as the ultimate, high-tech savior of the British family hatchback market, the Austin Maestro. British Leyland was desperate to prove they could compete with the cutting-edge digital trends coming out of Japan and Germany. To do this, they equipped the top-tier Vandenplas and MG versions of the Maestro with a highly publicized, futuristic electronic talking dashboard. Utilizing a synthesized computer voice, the car was programmed to physically speak to the driver, warning them about low fuel, unfastened seatbelts, or fluid levels. But what sounded like brilliant science fiction in the showroom quickly transformed into an absolute psychological torture device on daily commutes. The early electronic systems were incredibly glitchy and poorly insulated from moisture. As a result, the robotic voice would randomly malfunction, constantly nagging, interrupting, and shouting at the driver in a cold, monotone British accent to check their brakes or oil, even when the car was running perfectly fine. Owners who had spent their hard-earned money for a peaceful drive to work were left trapped in a cabin with a machine that wouldn't stop backchatting them. The frustration reached such a boiling point across the UK that many furious owners reportedly took screwdrivers and hammers directly to their own dashboards just to silence the computerized voice permanently, leaving them with deep, bitter regret for buying into British Leyland's talking gimmick. Number 9. Rover 800. The flaking premium illusion. In 1986, the Rover Group pulled off what seemed like the ultimate business masterstroke, a prestigious partnership with Honda to build a world-class luxury flagship saloon, the Rover 800. It was designed to replace the aging SD1 and conquer the lucrative executive parking lots of Wall Street and London. With Honda handling the core engine engineering and Rover designing the sophisticated, wood-lined interior, British businessmen proudly signed massive finance leases, believing they were finally getting Japanese reliability wrapped in traditional British Shahi prestige. But while the underlying Honda engineering was decent, the actual assembly inside the British factories was an absolute catastrophe of corner cutting. The quality control was so shockingly poor that the premium paint layers lacked proper primer bonding. It was a common, agonizing sight for owners to watch their expensive executive metallic paint literally flake and peel off in large sheets during a standard car wash just weeks after leaving the showroom. The systems were a complete nightmare of short circuits. High-flying executives would drive to important corporate board meetings only for the electric windows to permanently jam open in the rain, the central locking to trap them inside, or the dashboard instruments to completely die at motorway speeds. The Rover 800 completely ruined the professional prestige of everyone who drove it, transforming a proud premium investment into a highly embarrassing, low-quality illusion that swindled the business elite. Number 8. Talbot Tagora, the instant depreciation abyss. The turn of the decade brought an incredibly strange and boxy executive anomaly to the British market, the 1981 Talbot Tagora. Developed during the chaotic transition where Peugeot took over Chrysler's European operations, the Tagora was rushed out as a large, luxury cruiser meant to steal sales away from Ford's dominant Granada. It featured a choice of engines, including a smooth V6 and a vast, cavernous cabin designed to transport high-end clients in absolute comfort. But the moment the public laid eyes on it, a wave of collective rejection swept through the market. The styling was an absolute disaster of uninspired, slab-sided boxiness that looked incredibly cheap and lacked any sense of premium elegance or status. Buyers completely ignored it, and those few individuals who were foolish or brave enough to actually buy one stepped directly into a financial abyss. Because nobody wanted a Tagora, its resale value suffered a catastrophic, historic collapse, with the vehicle losing up to 70% of its initial purchase price within the very first week of ownership. Finding replacement body parts or specialized trim was completely impossible because production lines ground to a halt almost immediately. Owners were stuck with a massive, visually offensive geometric white elephant that they couldn't trade in, couldn't sell, and couldn't even give away, making the Tagora one of the most immediate financial disasters a British motorist could ever experience. Number 7. Morris Ital, the recycled rust deception. In 1980, British Leyland knew they couldn't afford to develop a brand new car to replace the universally criticized Morris Marina. So, they employed a classic piece of marketing deception. They sent the old Marina body to the famous Italian styling house Ital Design, made a few minor tweaks to the plastic bumpers, headlights, and tail lamps, and proudly launched it as the all-new Morris Ital. British buyers, desperately hoping for a modern, reliable family saloon to start the new decade, walked into showrooms and trusted the marketing, believing they were buying a fresh piece of Italian-inspired motoring. But the moment they got the car home, the harsh reality set in. They had been completely swindled. Beneath the slightly altered plastic trim lay the exact same archaic, ancient mechanical platform from the 1970s Marina, meaning the handling remained completely dreadful and uncooperative. Worse still, the manufacturing quality at the factory had sunk to an all-time low. British Leyland was using untreated, highly impure steel sheets that were often left exposed to the damp British weather before assembly. As a result, the Morris Ital would literally arrive at dealerships with structural rust already developing inside the door seams and sills. Within a couple of seasons, the front wings would crumble into brown powder. Buyers realized they had paid premium new car money for a recycled, rapidly decomposing piece of old technology, cementing the Ital as a symbol of ultimate corporate betrayal. Number 6. Reliant Rialto, the high-wind highway trap. In 1982, Reliant launched the Rialto as the highly anticipated, modernized successor to the legendary three-wheeled Robin. Featuring a more aerodynamic, angular wedge design made of lightweight fiberglass and an upgraded, highly efficient 850 cubic centimeters engine. It was marketed as the ultimate tax-evading, fuel-sipping savior for working-class commuters and retirees who wanted to beat the harsh economic recession of the early 80s. But while it looked a bit more modern, the Rialto retained the fatal, unstable layout of its predecessor, creating a terrifying trap on modern high-speed roads. Because the body was constructed entirely of incredibly thin, featherweight plastic layers and sat on just a single wheel at the front, the Rialto had almost zero aerodynamic stability. Whenever an unsuspecting owner took their Rialto onto a modern British motorway on a typically windy day, the driving experience turned into a white-knuckle horror show. A sudden gust of wind or the aerodynamic wake of a passing commercial lorry would physically lift the front wheel off the tarmac, causing the entire plastic capsule to swerve violently or violently flip completely upside down onto its roof. Owners who bought the Rialto to safely and economically transport their families found themselves genuinely fearing for their lives every time they crossed a bridge, bitterly regretting the day they traded four-wheeled stability for a dangerous, lightweight plastic toy. Number 5. Austin Montego, the crumbling eco-plastic nightmare. Launched with massive fanfare in 1984, the Austin Montego was British Leyland's great midsize hope, designed to completely conquer the highly lucrative fleet and family market. It was styled to look sleek, aerodynamic, and highly modern, featuring massive, body-colored wraparound bumpers that were supposed to absorb minor impacts without denting, showcasing the industry's shift toward eco-friendly, lightweight materials. But the execution of this plastic revolution was a total nightmare of extreme cost-cutting. To save money, the factory utilized a highly fragile, low-grade compound for the plastic bumpers and interior trim. During the freezing British winter months, this cheap plastic would become incredibly brittle. A minor parking touch or even a heavy frost would cause the massive front and rear bumpers to literally crack, shatter, and fall apart onto the pavement like cheap glass. Furthermore, the structural suspension mounts were incredibly weak. The car was notorious for sagging severely in the middle under the weight of a standard family luggage load. Owners who had invested their hard-earned money into what they thought was a durable, modern family vehicle watched in absolute horror as their cars physically crumbled and bent before their eyes, leaving them holding a broken, plastic nightmare that was completely worthless on the used market. Number 4. Ford Orion, the spoonlock security catastrophe. The Ford Orion, introduced in 1983, was a highly desirable, upscale, three-box saloon version of the immensely popular Ford Escort. Targeted at respectable, aspirational suburban families and middle managers, it offered a massive boot, premium velour seating, and an air of conservative prosperity that looked fantastic parked on a pristine suburban driveway. Families felt immense pride in owning one. But the Orion possessed a hidden, fatal flaw that turned it into the single most hated target for criminals across Great Britain: a completely useless, catastrophically insecure locking system. Ford utilized a standardized, low-cost lock barrel design that wore down with extreme speed. Within just a year of regular use, the internal lock tumblers would become so loose that the car could be unlocked and started with almost any flat object. Joyriders and thieves quickly discovered that they could open a brand new Ford Orion using nothing more than a common household metal spoon, a toothpick, or a completely different Ford key. Owners would lock their prized Orions at night, only to wake up the next morning to find an empty driveway and a pile of shattered glass. Insurance premiums for the Orion skyrocketed to astronomical, unaffordable levels, leaving honest owners completely swindled by a security system that was a literal open invitation to every criminal in the country. Number 3. Vauxhall Nova, early models, the detached accelerator terror. In 1983, Vauxhall launched the Nova, a sharp-looking, highly practical little super mini designed to capture the hearts of first-time drivers, young mothers, and budget-conscious families. It was agile, incredibly easy to park, and offered a bright, cheerful cabin that made an instant sales hit across British high streets. But behind that cheerful, compact facade lay a shocking mechanical oversight in the early production models that turned simple daily driving into a moment of pure terror. To maximize factory profit margins, Vauxhall utilized extremely thin, low-grade steel stampings for the driver's footwell floorboard assembly. The heavy-duty accelerator pedal mechanism was bolted directly into this thin metal sheet with zero structural reinforcement. Over just a year of standard daily driving, the repeated pressure of the driver's foot, combined with moisture seeping through the cheap carpets, would cause the metal surrounding the pedal mount to rapidly fatigue, crack, and completely rot away. Without warning, while accelerating onto a fast-moving dual carriageway or roundabout, the entire gas pedal would suddenly snap completely off the floorboard, dropping flat onto the floor or jamming the throttle wide open. This catastrophic structural failure caused absolute panic and numerous accidents, leaving terrified owners realizing they had spent their hard-earned savings on a vehicle that would literally fall apart under the pressure of a human foot. Number 2. Triumph Acclaim, the rebranded cultural deception. The year 1981 marked a deeply emotional, bittersweet milestone for traditional British motoring enthusiasts with the launch of the Triumph Acclaim. Marketed heavily as a proud, new British family saloon, it was supposed to keep the historic, iconic Triumph brand alive for a new generation. British traditionalists and older motorists, fiercely loyal to domestic manufacturing, proudly walked into dealerships to support their country's industry. But the moment they popped the bonnet or read the engineering fine print, a deep sense of cultural betrayal set in. The Triumph Acclaim wasn't a British car at all. It was a completely unadulterated, rebranded Japanese Honda Ballade built under a licensing agreement. Every single major mechanical component, from the engine and transmission to the dashboard electronics and suspension layout, was pure Japanese technology shipped over in crates. For a generation of buyers who had spent decades taking immense national pride in British engineering heritage, realizing they had been sold a Japanese commuter car wrapped in a classic British badge was a devastating blow. It completely shattered their traditional automotive pride, turning the Acclaim into a cynical, heartbreaking piece of marketing deception that marked the permanent, tragic end of a true Triumph legacy. Number 1. DeLorean DMC-12, the stainless steel financial mirage. We arrive at our number 1 spot, the absolute ultimate king of 1980s automotive betrayal, a vehicle whose story of deception is completely legendary. The DeLorean DMC-12. Built in a brand new, heavily subsidized factory in Dunmurry, Northern Ireland, using hundreds of millions of pounds of British taxpayer money, this car was hyped to the world as the ultimate, futuristic automotive masterpiece. With its brushed stainless steel body panels, radical low-slung styling, and iconic gull-wing doors, it captured the global imagination and became an immortal icon of pop culture and Back to the Future. But for the wealthy individuals who actually paid the astronomical real-world purchase price to own one, the DMC-12 was an unmitigated disaster that left them feeling completely swindled. The build quality out of the strike-plagued, inexperienced Northern Irish factory was shockingly incompetent. The complex gull-wing doors were a mechanical nightmare. The heavy torsion bars would fail constantly, either trapping the wealthy owners inside their own cars or jamming halfway open in public parking lots, exposing the expensive interior to the rain. The brushed stainless steel panels were impossible to keep clean, showing every fingerprint and smudge, and couldn't be repaired by traditional body shops if dented. Worst of all was the performance betrayal. Despite looking like a Mach-speed supercar, it was fitted with a weak, heavily restricted 2.8-liter Peugeot Volvo V6 engine that produced a miserable 130 horsepower. An ordinary, cheap family hatchback could effortlessly beat a DeLorean in a straight-line race. It was a slow, heavy, unreliable, and poorly assembled financial mirage that completely collapsed in a corporate bankruptcy and scandal, cementing the DeLorean DMC-12 as the single greatest, most spectacular monument to buyers' remorse and corporate deception in the entire history of modern motoring. The tragic history of these 1980s disasters serves as a powerful, cautionary reminder of an era when flashy gimmicks and corporate cost-cutting completely compromised mechanical honesty, leaving a generation of swindled motorists in their wake. Subscribe to UKTorque for more unvarnished, honest chapters from our rich automotive history. And let us know in the comments below, did you or anyone in your family ever fall for one of these 1980s illusions of modernization?